My name is George Pradle. I'm the Senior Director of Strategic Alliances for Qwest Software. I want to thank everybody for taking time out of your schedule. I know from having attended these things as a guest and going back to BrainShare and such, show my age a little bit. But I know with these events, you only get a certain number of them. And so that doesn't go unappreciated here that you chose to come here. I think we've got a really special presentation for you today. I've only got about 150 slides to go through, so is that okay? Now we're going to keep it pretty short. We're going to leave you a little bit extra time at the end so you can ask questions. We're very fortunate today to have Dale Ficken here from Thomson Reuters. And as much as I like to pride myself on being a halfway decent speaker, it's much more important as you guys are going out there and trying to do these implementations, trying to see maybe what's in front of you, maybe better ways that you can actually address those issues. You actually have Dale, who's done the capacity work at Thomson Reuters and has worked with VFog Light, to be able to just kind of throw out questions and such and actually get real-world experience about how to get through some of those. So we'll kind of dive into this today. We'll talk a little bit about the state of virtualization, the fact that everybody's here today. We've got, 15,000, 18,000 attendees to this? I mean, it's pretty amazing. If you try to get into a restaurant lately, you'd probably agree with that. The barriers to virtualization success and maybe some ways that we can actually get around that to be able to help you solve some of those problems ahead of time. I think some of the things we're going to talk about are more about kind of the differences in the way of when you go to virtualization. My background is I was actually a VMware systems engineer from 2004 to 2006. I was with Citrix before that, and I've been with Qwest since 2006. So basically we'll talk a little bit about a case study with Dale with Thomson Reuters. We'll give you a chance to ask him some questions. But we'll also talk a little bit about what we call AMP, which is Analyze, Monitor, and Provisioning, to give you an idea of where Qwest is going with this technology. So this slide will be a big surprise to everybody in this room. Virtualization is taking hold. Ta-da! Gartner's saying by 2012, 48% of all the x86 servers are going to be virtualized. And I think you're even saying in some of your environments, you may already be past this number. I was actually pretty surprised. I go out on a lot of calls to talk with customers, and I'm surprised at how many of them are actually at 70% already. And with that, I think that's a real testament to VMware as well as to the partner relationships that are available. The fact that you've got some of your more difficult workloads to virtualize, VMware's providing the basis to be able to do those now, and I think there's a lot more confidence. But along with that comes the ability to monitor those, and you have to be able to dive down into those environments, be able to see where your problems are quickly, because virtualization is always the first thing that's going to get blamed, right, when you bring those things in. So let's figure out ways that we can actually show where the problems are. The big key challenge, a lot of people think that virtualization is fairly new with VMware, but back on the mid-'70s, you had the OS 360 on the mainframe. And frankly, a lot of the same issues that we see today actually go back to those days. So when we look at this in the form of virtualization on the x86 platform, we're taking a look at resource sharing with CPUs. Now, the thing about that is that how many of you have seen, in the last 10 years, now that virtualization has taken hold, you've basically taken all the reins off the engineers at all the hardware manufacturers and just said, go nuts, go crazy with the stuff that you can build. I mean, think about the changes in servers that you've seen. But with those CPUs, you've got multi-core processors. The multi-core processors, you've got the different virtual processors. It's just a way that you can actually take those workloads, and on a two-socket system, you're running incredible densities. But now the whole thing comes down to, well, where's the bottleneck, right? Because your bottlenecks, you're always going to have something that's going to be the bottleneck. So now where's it going to be? Is it going to be CPU? Is it going to be memory? With memory, you've got the ability to do sharing, overcommitment. VMware has a very intelligent way of doing memory. One of the things with memory, though, that I think is, and this is just kind of a basis for virtualization, it has everything to do with the mental state of getting your business units to go into virtualization. I'm sure this has never happened in your environment, but just play along with me, because in some environments I go talk to, they go to the business unit, and the business unit actually asks for more memory than they really need. Now, this is a situation where maybe you know that it can run on 512 meg, but they're asking for 4 gig. And they're saying that because the manufacturer of the software is saying you got to have 4 gig in order to run this. So you can give them memory, and a couple guys I've heard go, yeah, we give them 4 gig, we set up a resource pool, and we just crank it down. So I thought it was a fun idea. But the thing is, with memory over allocation, you need to be able to know which of your virtual machines are over allocated. And that's one of the things that we'll talk about a little bit today. If we actually go back on the CPUs as well, how many of you have either learned the easy way or the hard way that when you create a virtual machine, it's really tempting when it says, how many virtual CPUs do you want? And you got all these cores now, right? So you go, well, 1's good, 2's got to be better, 4's got to be even better, 8, that's got to run like greased lightning. When exactly the opposite's true, is that unless you've got applications that can take advantage of all those, you'll actually see one virtual machine that's got 4 virtual CPUs, and if you knock it down to 2 virtual CPUs, guess what? Runs a lot faster. So the whole thing is just understanding your environment, understanding virtualization, and having tools to actually help you do that. The other thing is that some of you have implemented shares, and when you've got shares in an environment, shares typically ended up being a tool to use when the virtual machines didn't move around quite as much. And so you had the ability to really nail down those shares because it was on one ESX host and you wanted to give more rights to certain virtual machines. But now that those things move around, wouldn't it be nice to kind of go through your virtual machines and see if you allocated shares maybe you forgot about? Because we're all learning, that's the whole thing about this, is that we're learning as we go. Network and disk are obviously big issues as well. With network, we're taking a look at load balancing, et cetera. You got to be able to see where your problem situations are on the network and then on the disk. What the disk is going to be is that if you look at any type of VDI implementations, anybody notice a little bit difference in the workloads between your servers and then your desktops that you've virtualized, where the servers are kind of more of a steady, but the desktops at 8 o'clock in the morning are slamming the system, and then you don't have just a really nice clean load. So we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing in that space as well, but these are all some of the challenges that you run into. So in virtualization management, once you get about 80 ESX hosts or so, you start getting a little bit beyond some of the native tools, and you need to really get some things that are going to help you do things. Well, one of them, detecting, diagnosing, and resolving problems. If you can get ahead of the game and you can figure out that maybe you got a problem with your percent ready on a certain cluster is approaching 5%, and you want to make sure that you get down below that, maybe add another ESX host, move some virtual machines or whatever, you need to have tools that are going to recognize that. Over allocation of memory, something that's going to recognize that as well. So the whole idea is here, how can you find out the problem and then drill down into that virtual machine, into that part of your infrastructure as quickly as possible, figure out what the problem is, and then get that problem resolved. Difficult to plan for growth and change. Because of the way that these environments grow, one of the things that it's hard to try to keep in mind is the fact that in the past, it took maybe 4 to 6 weeks to rack, stack, and deploy a server. Well, 4 to 6 weeks provides a lot of time for some bottlenecks to be in there that can slow things down and make appropriate changes. But when you're trying to plan for growth and change and it takes 4 to 6 minutes, if you've got templates installed, boom, a new virtual machine comes up. And how many people in your environments think virtual machines are free once they buy the ESX host? Well, that's where you might want to be able to associate some of the costs with that infrastructure through some sort of a chargeback mechanism. Also, the idea of having some sort of business SLAs to the infrastructure. You got your different departments, maybe different geographical locations. You need to be able to separate those out and be able to see them. Well, that's where VFog Light comes in. VFog Light is our monitoring tool that just does so much more than that. It does performance monitoring, but as well we can do capacity planning. So that if you want to see what a certain number of instances of a certain virtual machine is going to look like on that new server that you're going to buy, you can model that with a capacity planning tool that's built in. The other thing that I would mention with VFog Light is that with all these solutions, there's one database underneath that you need to maintain. So you're going to be pulling all this data out of one database instead of doing multiple ones. The chargeback. I talked to a lot of customers. I actually have a couple customers that are actually doing chargeback. However, most customers are doing what I like to call showback, meaning that I need to get that data available to find out if I'm trying to figure out how much to charge a certain business unit for a virtual machine. I need to have some background information upon, in the past, how much resources is taken up, how many gigahertz, et cetera. And once I have that information, I can go into a meeting and intelligently show, look, your application has taken up this many resources, and going forward, as we put more systems online, you're going to have to pay a little bit more. Our chargeback system will do the two major ways that Gartner recommends, which is the MRU, which is the measured resource utilization, and also TFR, tiered flat rate. As I like to call it, the cable bill and the electric bill. So do you want to have it measured like an electric bill, or you want the cable bill where no matter how much resources they use, they're paying a set price? The other thing we do is add-ons, because it's kind of like if you want more hard drive, that type of thing, it makes it easy to do, because that way you can just a checkbox, and that way you can add those chargebacks. Service management is something I think is really important as you go forward. As you mature on the virtualization cycle, what you'll see is that you go from the low-hanging fruit, which is just your basic stuff, and everybody in this room is probably on a little bit different part of this virtualization maturity cycle, is that as you go forward with it, what you'll see is that as you get more and more servers, you got to be a little bit more structured, and it becomes more strategic within the environment. Now, if you think about your x86 servers, the larger the number of percentage of x86 servers that are virtualized, the more spotlight you have on your shoulders to make sure that you're doing things right, and you need to be able to report up, that type of thing. Service management allows you to take a group of servers and to be able to create dashboards, to be able to report on those particular service pieces. If you think about like a server, sometimes people forget about the fact that they look at that SQL database and they go, well, this is really important to this application. But they forget about the web server that's front-ending it. They're forgetting about the other pieces that are in that pie. And that's where service management can really help out quite a bit. So at this time, what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce Dale Ficken, who's from Thomson Reuters, who's going to go over a little bit about their implementation and what they've done and how they're managing the growth. And I think after that, we'll have a couple of questions that I might pose to Dale just to kind of get a little bit more information out of him. But it's really a pretty incredible story, and we wanted to share that with you today. And I want to really thank Dale publicly here for joining us today. Dale?
No problem. Thank you.
Sure.
Hello. My name's Dale Ficken. I'm with Thomson Reuters. I'm a virtualization capacity analyst, and I've been with the company for about 12 years. I actually started, well, first off, I was actually with Bridge Information Systems, which got bought out by Reuters, which now merged with Thomson Reuters. I actually started on the technical side on the help desk 12 years ago, and worked my way through implementation and support. Managed a lot of web server farms, did a lot of implementation there. Managed Reuters.com for a couple of years, and then finally doing the virtualization capacity. A little bit about the agenda that I'm going to cover, give you a brief overview of the company background, touch base with the IT infrastructure and strategy that we have, a little bit about our management strategy, and then how we're moving forward with Quest. So it's not going to be too long. A little bit about our company background. We're the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. If you've ever been to Times Square, you've probably seen our logos plastered all over the place. The division that I'm actually under is actually the markets division. We focus on delivering real-time stock market data and news and video in real time to a lot of endpoint clients. As you can see, we have a couple of different divisions. The markets division, which consists of sales and trading, enterprise, investment advisory, and media. And we also have a professional division, which consists of legal, tax and accounting, and healthcare and science. As far as employees, globally, we have about 55,000. So it's a fairly large company. Revenues in 2009, we actually hit $12.9 billion. Now I'm going to touch base on our IT infrastructure and strategy. Again, I'm going to be focusing on the markets division because it's the division that I'm actually working under. We have about 20 data centers worldwide with about 40,000 assets. Currently, we're running about 2,000 VMs on a shared managed infrastructure, and that's kind of important because we do have other environments with VMs, desktop virtualization we're doing. I think it might even be outsourced, but so I'm not focusing on that. I'm primarily focusing on the infrastructure that I actually do capacity management for. So we have 2,000 for that, and then by the end of 2010, we plan on having 40,000 VMs. The data center consolidation is a big thing that we're actually focusing on. 2014 targets, we're planning on having 40% virtualized for production and 75% virtualized in pre-production QA and development. Also, standardization is a really big focus, and that kind of goes hand in hand with the data center consolidation, and of course, more efficient use of hardware and also power cooling and space savings. I'm going to go touch base briefly on our management strategy. So when we decided to go with virtualization, we had a couple of challenges we wanted to find out. With capacity planning, how do we monitor and report on current utilization at a cluster level, which was really big to us. We kind of wanted to let VMware do its own thing from a cluster perspective, and we wanted to be able to generate reports as a cluster, as its own entity. And also, how to identify bottlenecks within the virtual infrastructure, ability to comfortably add VMs. And what I mean by that is basically having the confidence. So when you actually want to add a VM, you're not going to be concerned about, oh, okay, is this, this ESX host or this cluster going to fall on its face because I added this thing, or I added, a handful of VMs. And then also knowing when to add additional hardware, when to add additional ESX hosts to the cluster. Performance monitoring, being able to ensure support for applications and business services, also having the ability to view and manage alerts. And then last but not least is meeting service level agreements. Within Thomson Reuters, we have a lot of internal business units, and each one of them have their own individual requirements, their unique requirements, and so we want to be able to make sure that we're meeting each one of those requirements. So the solution that we came up with was to utilize, or ended up utilizing, was VFog Light. We currently have over 800 sockets under management. 410 of those are dedicated to the markets division. That equates to about 205 ESX hosts that we're running with. So, and they're part of a wide variety of clusters. And in the end, we've reduced the time needed for capacity planning by 90%. It's allowed us to quickly resolve capacity issues within our legacy environments. When I first started, it wasn't a mess, but there definitely needed to be a much stronger focus on capacity management. Ran into some capacity issues, and we've pretty much eliminated all capacity issues for the legacy environments. And it gave us the ability to process new VM requests in a much shorter time frame. Another thing that I do besides the capacity management piece is actually demand management. And the way it works is, I guess I'm sort of the gatekeeper, but VMs come in, requests actually come in, so I manage those requests as well. And I kind of take a look at what they're actually requiring, and then I use VFog Light pretty much on a daily basis, so I have a really good idea of what each cluster from a utilization standpoint is actually, where each cluster is at from a utilization standpoint. So I'm able to cross-reference that data and be able to, comfortably say, okay, this can go on this cluster, this can go on this cluster, and so forth. So that's helped out quite a bit. Our mean time to resolution for infrastructure issues was shortened by 75%. It's helped defer large infrastructure investments. And then last, it's definitely an ideal reporting solution. For me especially, there's a lot of unique reports, and there's a lot of customizable reports that you can use for VFog Light. I send a lot of these to upper management, and they've been really, really happy. So that's a big, big plus. And then last, moving forward with Quest, of course, we're going to continue to expand our use of VFog Light. From a current usage perspective, as I stated before, we're utilizing it for performance monitoring, capacity planning, and reporting. Near-term usage, we're planning service management, and also individual dashboards for the various business units. And this is kind of cool because, as I stated before, with the internal business units, they have their each individual requirements, and we have quite a bit of ESX hosts spread across, and they may have, and then the clusters themselves are sort of organized by security zones, so they may need a couple that are internet-facing, they may need a couple that's more back-end. And so with the individual dashboards, what we're doing is going to be creating just literally that. It's like a portal, and it'll show them all of their VMs, even though those VMs are scattered across multiple clusters, and it just gives them a nice little view of that business unit's VMs. And another cool thing is you can give them access to actually run reports for their specific VMs, and that's a huge time saver because if any of you know, a lot of people come up and ask you to run a report on this or run a report on this, and you can give them that functionality. Saves you a lot of time. So yeah, definitely going forward, Quest has a solid strategy for virtualization and cloud management. We do believe that. Of course, management is, for these environments, are really important. We're going to continue to maximize our virtualization deployments and look forward to utilizing Quest for our analysis and monitoring and provisioning of our mixed infrastructure. So other than that, I'm pretty short, so I'll give it back to you.
We're not letting you get away just quite that quick. Got a couple questions for you.
Sure.
Is that the VFog product is actually available for download. It's a 30-day free trial that is non-crippled whatsoever. If somebody downloads that, do you have any recommendations for them?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I would say download it, try it out, and I would say, read the literature and see how to actually do the install, and just try it out and see what you think. The best thing that I've done was play with it. I still don't know all of the features. There's definitely a lot of them, and that's one of the things that we did. We actually tested it for quite some time, and it's one of the reasons why we decided to go with it.
Did you find the V-bundle reports helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually touched on that for 1 second. But beforehand, I was going to say everyone's requirement's a little bit different. So with us, we use it for certain things. Everyone's environment's different. Everyone's needs are different. And I think one of the benefits of VFog Light is it actually spreads across a wide variety of things that it can actually do. So, for us, it fits really well here. And for you guys, it might fit, well over here, or it might actually be good for the entire thing. So, yeah, and as far as the V-bundle, the reporting, one of the things I stumbled across, and this is another cool thing about VFog Light, is you can actually install additional cartridges, and they have this thing called V-bundle, and you can probably go into how that was actually created. But a cool piece is it's got a lot of reports from other clients, at least this is the way I understand it. It's got a lot of reports from other clients that they thought were really, really useful, and they sort of bundle them all up and then put them available for download, so you can just install them, and so you have all these really cool, unique reports that give you stuff like you have a bunch of VMs and you want to know if any of them are free for memory for 50% or above or something. You can put these variables in and run that report, and it'll spit back a report of all VMs that aren't utilizing this amount of memory. Or, for example, storage, like you were saying before. Actually, we run into that all the time. Guys will actually put in a request for 4 virtual CPUs, 8 gigs of RAM, and it's like, geez, come on. And what we'll do, I'll go ahead, please them, do the install, have them actually do it, give it to the implementation team to deploy, because I know we have the capacity initially, and then what I'll do is, at the end of the month, I'll go back, run that report, and then show it to them and say, look, you guys are using like 2% of the vCPU, 10% of the memory, and like barely any of the storage. We're actually going to shrink that down. And until you can prove to us that you actually need it, then so.
Have you ever used the inventory report?
Yeah, the inventory report's really cool. We've actually, for management, they want to know how many VMs we have under what particular divisions, and we've actually utilized that quite a bit as well. So
the nice part with the inventory report is that it'll give you the operating system within the virtual machine, as well as how many CPUs are put to it, how much memory is assigned to it. Also, the virtual or the server, the ESX server that it's registered to, it'll give you what the operating system is of that. Because I know some of you are either on 4.x, you're going to 4.1, some of you are probably on 3.5 still, and so as you're trying to do troubleshooting, that can actually be pretty helpful.
Yeah, so we have a big mix of environment of 3.5 and also 4, so it helps quite a bit.
Outstanding. Okay. Cool. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll let you go ahead and sit down for a second. I'll finish up here, and then we'll open it up for questions for Dale. So you guys, if you have any, you can move forward with that as well. So to give you a little bit of idea about where we are as Quest and how we're kind of moving forward, and you guys, anybody get enough cloud, initiation here in the last couple of years? It wouldn't be a presentation unless we put the word cloud in. But the reality is that, public clouds, private clouds, it's starting to make a lot more sense now, because now it's a group of resources, and being able to do that in a more intelligent manner. Back in 2008, we were doing more passive, just monitoring the environment and being able to kind of give you a little bit of information here. 2009, we added in the ability to do provisioning in that with our automation tools, to do administration, and we added capacity planning. This year, we actually, started to move in. We've put remediation in, and you can actually go down, and I would encourage all of you, if you had a few minutes, go down to the Quest booth downstairs. We're right behind the EMC. I could give you the booth numbers, but frankly, I don't think that helps you a whole lot. But just it's right behind the EMC booth. The giant 2 Quest booths. There's a giant Jumbotron and stuff. And just kind of take a look at the VFog pieces. I think what you'll find is that with the remediation pieces that we've added into that, now if you've got a virtual machine that has a certain amount of memory allocated to it, you can actually schedule for that virtual machine to be taken down, for that amount of memory to be changed, and then brought back up. So this is kind of the direction we're headed. Not doing any of this without your direction, But as far as the cloud automation, some of you may or may not be familiar with the fact that we purchased Surgient. Surgient, when I was at VMware SC, that was kind of the lab manager competitor back at that time. So it's a very rich, very legacy product. And that gives us a lot of capabilities in the cloud pieces to be able to stand up your personal, your private cloud, your public cloud, and be able to do that in an intelligent way. Going forward, next year, we're looking to even take this even farther with all the pieces that we've already added, but then going farther, making actually cloud more of a reality. It's the tagline we've got is simplicity at work, and I think the reality is what you'll see is that when Dale talks about these reports, the reports that we generate out of the box are reports that you guys need on a regular basis. What we're trying to do is take away some of the tasks that you're given where you go, my workday is just a little busy enough. Now I got to go chasing after some sort of report on what all the inventory is on all the virtual machines. Oh yeah, we want the OS, etc. The ability to build customized dashboards, the ability to create reports that will be important, and on a weekly basis, monthly basis, whatever, have those reports just emailed automatically to someone. And the other thing to mention is that within the product, you can go anywhere from 1 hour to whatever the database is, a couple of years, as far as looking at the amount of data. So if you want to be able to look at, let's say, a 6-month period to see what a half year looks like on that particular server, things that are also interesting, snapshots that are out there and are open. Are they connected to a virtual machine that's on? Is a virtual machine that's off? Because it's pretty scary deleting those snapshots, but then they keep growing on you and such. This is the reality of virtualization. And so what we want to do is we want to help you take care of those things so you can focus on more important things. Quest has a vision, which is this, we call it AMP internally, which is basically the analyze, monitor, and provision. What that means is the ability to analyze not only virtual workloads, but also physical workloads, and to be able to give you information on your whole environment, not just your virtualized environment. And you'll see as we go forward the ability to kind of help you in those different areas as well. The other thing is to be able to monitor these environments. So you need to be able to monitor the physical, you need to be able to monitor the virtual, and then be able to give you advice about what to do about it. Some of the other things are being able to do provisioning, to be able to provision these types of things, so that way when you're doing the provisioning with user requests, best fits, etc., because as you go forward and you're going to get a little bit more sophisticated with these environments, what you're going to start thinking of is, okay, where should I put this new virtual machine and where will it run best? Is there a basis by which putting it on this one particular server is going to be better than putting it on another server, etc.? So if we take a look at the Quest solution of analyze, monitor, and provisioning, monitoring, administration, capacity planning, chargeback, service management, we talked about all those. But now if you think about the way that extends with infrastructure, so Microsoft Exchange, you've got all the Windows pieces, because as some of you may or may not know, Quest is extremely well known and the leader with Microsoft applications, being able to help you manage your Microsoft environment. Well, that's the applications you're running within these virtual machines. On the storage end, we just introduced yesterday VFog storage, because how many of you in this group, you're blind to the storage? Yeah, great. We can see it within the virtual environment. We know what LUN it's on, but when that LUN is having a problem, or those virtual machines are having problems, how do you know whether or not it's the switch and maybe it's something on one of the spindles, or if it's actually something in your virtual environment? VFog storage is a companion to VFog that's going to allow you to actually correlate the virtual machines that are on the physical spindles, and it will tell you, okay, these virtual machines sit on these physical spindles, and so you can go to your storage administrator with a lot more knowledge and a lot more intelligence, be able to get information. Physical, virtual, and cloud. I mean, the reality of it is that if you want to actually realize what public cloud is, private cloud, etc., is that you need to be able to combine your physical infrastructure as well as your virtual infrastructure and your physical infrastructure underneath your virtual infrastructure, and be able to monitor those appropriately, be able to stand up virtual machines, etc. And that's where the Surgient acquisition comes into play to help you actually make that possible. And then finally, automation, which actually the Surgient piece, as well as a product we used to have called vControl, which is now part of VFog Light. The automation piece is that once you do these things over and over and over again, there's a reason why, in the past you've written batch scripts, right? Well, this is kind of like the way that you're going to do this is instead of every time I see this thing go happen in my environment, I want to do X, Y, and Z. Or I want to be told about it and then press a button and have it go out and do that. So I think, you'll see that if you have the opportunity to stop by the booths, what you'll find is a very rich set of tools. One of the other tools that I always like to mention to people, because it's really a grassroots type of tool, is one called vOptimizer Pro. With VFog Light, we can actually tell you if virtual machines are running out of disk space. Well, that's great because Windows Update has started, taking part of your space that you've got inside the virtual machine. And frankly, unless you're psychic, how do you really build a virtual machine exactly the right size? You can get, some assistance in that. But what vOptimizer Pro will allow you to do is right-size that virtual machine up or down so you can either add more disk space to it or remove disk space. We have a disk partition within that within the tool so that it takes the virtual machine down, changes the size of the virtual machine, and then brings it back up. And so this is a very nice, elegant way to right-size your virtual machines. The other part of that is it also does what's called 64K boundary alignment. As you move into having more and more of these transactional virtual machines, your higher-end virtual machines, performance is going to be a bigger and bigger issue. And so what you need to do is you need to make sure that you're doing everything possible. Aligning your virtual machines along the 64K boundary has been a VMware recommendation going back till I think it was like 2003, 2004, very early days. But the problem is it's very hard to do. So what we've done is we've automated that process, and this tool will allow you to do it. You only got to do it once on a virtual machine, and you'll see about 8 to 13% performance increase, but you'll see more of it on like a transactional virtual machine, which is even more important today. So what we want to do is we want to bring Dale back up, give you guys an opportunity to ask Dale some questions about his environment, or if you have questions for me, we can do that as well. We want him to leave plenty of time at the end here so that you have a chance to ask questions, and then also be able to have time to get to your next session too, because the way those lines form, we want to make sure that you're in good shape. So anybody want, if you have the chance to go up to the microphone, that's awesome, but if not, we'll just repeat the question. And for those of you who need to leave, thank you very much for attending. Okay, go ahead. Question?
So I heard you talk about the capacity planning part. Do you have modeling tools? And if so, what do the input variables look like for those modeling tools to scale environment?
Okay. Did you use any? I can talk about it, right? Why don't you go talk about yours first, or how you guys did stuff?
Well, yeah, so like I said, it's a bit of a manual process at the moment. What we're actually doing, the way that I'm doing it right now is I run reports like on a weekly basis so I can get a really good idea of trending and have a pretty good feel. We had quite a few VMs. As you noticed, like by the end of 2010, we're actually going to go from 2,000 to 4,000. So we have a pretty good flood of VMs that are coming in, and I can get a pretty good idea of the utilization per VM. Tricky part is that we're with the the real-time financial data distribution. So it depends on the box, but there's a good amount of VMs actually are dependent strictly on market. So if the market's really, really active, these VMs are going to be really, really busy, and when they're not, so it's really hard to actually get a better idea or kind of trend it. So overall, right now what I'm doing is more of a manual process, looking back a couple of months, kind of doing a trending, definitely using some, spreadsheet work as well. It's not, eliminating any Excel work, but yeah, so doing that, and then I have a pretty good idea going forward. And then also from the demand management side, the other piece that's really nice is I actually run a pipeline so I can forecast out, how many VMs are coming in September, October. So I have a really good idea of what we need to do for, we have this really big order of VMs coming in, and so we need to add X amount of ESX hosts because it's going to run out at this particular date. Now, I can't get to a point of it's going to run out at this specific date, but actually there was, right now I'm using VFog Light 6.1, and I think there was, I can't remember the name of it, it was another plug in our cartridge, and it actually started tapping into trending, which was pretty cool. And I don't know if you remember, it was, anyway, so I was working with one of the tech guys, I got it. And again, the key thing that we were focusing on was I wanted to do this at a cluster level because we have so many ESX hosts and the VMs can kind of migrate. I really wanted to look at the cluster as its own entity, and when is that cluster going to start running out of resources? Hit certain caps like 75, 80%. Once I start seeing spikes above that, they're pretty consistent, then I know to actually add more ESX hosts to it. But yeah, there's a tool, I can't remember the name of it offhand.
Probably the Velocity bundle?
Velocity, that's it, yeah. And they're actually starting to do some good work and allowing you to actually do, because I think it's always had sort of what-if scenarios if you add one VM to this particular host. But what I wanted to do was, all right, show me from a trending perspective for overall cluster. And yeah, so far it looks like it's pretty promising. So I think it probably needs a little more work, but it's
so cool. Some of the metrics that we're looking at, we actually look at CPU, memory, disk, and network. So it's not just CPU and memory because of the fact that when you've got, let's say, a web server, it's going to have different characteristics than a file server, that type of thing. And so as you overlay certain number of instances onto the model, and you're able to either take an existing ESX host or you can actually kind of create the metrics for a new ESX host. And the way they're changing so fast nowadays, that's kind of the reason why we did that. But you can overlay, let's say you've got a certain virtual machine that roughly represents what a virtual machine is going to look like. You can determine the number of instances, and then you can overlay that onto the model, and it'll show you where you're going to run out of space like the quickest, whether it's on the disk I/O or if it's in the memory or the CPU, that type of thing. So it's a pretty nice tool. We're constantly improving it as we get things from customers. We do have these two bundles. One's called Velocity, one's called the Virtual Bundle. These are actually created by the systems engineers. The reason being is that they talk to the customers day in, day out, and people are asking for the same darn reports. So what we do is we build those, and then we actually bring those actually into the product as part of the shipping product, but in order to be able to get that out quicker. The other thing I would mention is that we actually have free training on VFog Light, and what's nice about it is that it's a way that I have a little ADD, so it's a great way that I like to learn, is that they're like little flash videos. And what's nice is that when you want to connect VFog Light up to your, using LDAP, what have you, you can go in there and you can review it. And I use the two-screen method where I got it up on one screen, I'm quickly pausing it, etc. And then you can go through the process there. Same thing goes for if you want to create a dashboard, a report, what have you. We can go through how to do that, but by the time you actually need it, it would be nice if virtualization was like the only thing you do day in, day out, but most people don't have quite that luxury, and if you do, it's not just the monitoring piece of it. So that way you can get training on the go, and it's free. We just feel that that's the right way to go for you guys to get the most benefit out of the product. So, great question. Yes?
Are you doing any type of like combined dashboard with virtual and obviously some environment?
Yeah, the question is, are we doing any kind of dashboards with physical and virtual? And the answer to that is yes. We have the ability, obviously, to do a virtual dashboard because we're gathering the information from Virtual Center. We're taking those statistics, and we can represent all those metrics. But we can also, just to give you a little background, VFog Light is actually built on the Qwest Fog Light product. So it's a very mature base that we've got. And what you'll see when you go downstairs is that a lot of people have legacy products that they will take and then try to retrofit for virtualization. But what I've seen is that with the other people that I've worked with, the other vendors that come up in the virtualization space, it's a lot easier to add in the physical pieces than it is for the legacy guys to add the virtual pieces to it. So to your point, Foglight's been able to monitor physical characteristics for a long time. Same dashboards that we're able to display side by side, we can pull metrics from that and kind of use some analysis to be able to see whether or not they're good candidates to be virtualized. That market's pretty much, there's a lot of things that are out there now to help you do that. But yeah, the answer to your question is yes, because of the fact that you've got so many people that want one tool eventually just to monitor everything, because that's kind of the golden chalice, if you will. But yeah, in fact, if you want to see any of that, just go down to the booth and ask them.
We actually purchased a product primarily for the VM side.
Okay. To monitor physical ones. What area are you in? What other country? New Jersey, okay. Because we can find out who your SC is and then get you in touch with them. Because the thing is that we've got extra cartridges available to monitor AD Exchange from the application side for monitoring physical, but those are separate cartridges from just the VMware cartridge. So, but being able to take a look at it and see if it fits your needs, be good. Okay, great. Yes? Support ESX 4.1. Mark, do you have the date for me? ESX 4.1 support? I know it's really quick. So, to my knowledge, though, Mark, have you seen any issues with 4.1? We're not taking advantage of all the extra metrics in that. I haven't seen any issues connecting it up to 4.1, but that said, it's not supported yet, so if you got to call into support, you know the routine. So, but good question. Yes? Does it support ESXi? Yes, it does support ESXi. It doesn't support free ESXi because free ESXi, the VMware doesn't give us all the tools we need to grab into it. But as far as ESXi goes, we're able to support ESX as well as ESXi, and I'll give you all the same metrics because we're pulling it through Virtual Center. And so now the one thing question is it can't, it's not going to be able to manage a standalone host. So whether it's ESXi or regular ESX, it won't be able to do that because we've got to use Virtual Center as our proxy. The reason why we do that is because it puts a lot less load on your virtual infrastructure, and as far as password management and that, it would be a freaking nightmare if we made you, change all the passwords and that go to every ESX host. Good question as well. Any other questions? Any answers? Anybody got good comments on restaurants, bars? Okay. Fantastic. Well, I think I want to really thank you again for your time. I know you're just deluged with stuff this week. Please, if you get a chance, go down to our booth. If you fill out an iPad, there's a survey where you can win an iPad. Like, if you don't win an iPad at this show, I think that's probably, you're not trying very hard. But there's also a passport, which if you just go and do a demo of our desktop virtualization, as well as just one of the products that we talked about today on the server side, you have a chance to win up to $5,000 tomorrow. And you have to be here at noon, so if you got a flight tonight, then just go down and take a look at the demos anyways. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. I want to thank Dale again, and have a great show. Thanks. Bye-bye.